Let's start the show by talking about my new sponsor, Paloma Verde Store. Head over to palomaverdestore.com for all of your CBD needs. They've got the CBD gummies, topicals, the salve, sports cream, soft gels, the tinctures. They've even got pet products. I love this stuff. Having gone to a night shift recently and having trouble sleeping during the day, it helps mellow me out and put me right down whenever I need to get some sleep for the day, so I'll be refreshed for my night shift. And Carlos and his wife Vanessa are awesome people, so I highly recommend go over and check out palomaverdestore.com for all of your CBD needs. And when you get there, if you enter in the promo code FACTS, you get 25% off anything in the store. Plus, if you sign up for the email, you get an additional 10% off. So that's potentially 35% off on your first order. And all orders over $75 are free shipping. So go over to palomaverdestore.com and check it out. This episode will be completely taken out of context. Welcome to the Fact Check This podcast. All right, Fact Check This podcast episode. I lost count. And doesn't matter. It'll be on the show notes anyway. Today I've got Evan back because since the last time we talked, even more shit has gone even more crazy. And, you know, the ever-shifting world of the narratives of COVID it's hard enough to keep up with, you know, in real time. And when we only chat every 2 or 3 months, then so much happens. So we're going to catch up and kind of get up to speed on everything that's going on. So Evan, what's going on with you and what's going on with COVID, especially in New York, but just generally speaking?
So in New York, most people are still walking around outside with masks, even though I'm pretty certain the majority of them have been vaccinated. It's even if they're completely young and healthy looking. You know, I was leaving work on Friday evening, and I intentionally, before I walked to the train, I strolled through like one of the more lively parts of the city, because I wanted to see what the atmosphere was like. I wanted to see, you know, because COVID, all the restrictions like officially ended earlier in the week. Like, oh, it's Friday night, it's going to be pumping. I just want to see what the atmosphere is like. And so I strolled through one of the more lively parts of the city, and it was pumping. There was a lot of people out, but like outdoors, mostly people in their 20s and 30s, all masked up. And these are people that are, excuse me, they're drinking cocktails, they're socializing with each other, and they still all have their masks on.
What happened to trust the science? Because it's like not just all of us crazy conspiracy theorists, but at this point, like the CDC has actually released statements saying that there is no evidence of outdoor transmission, and that if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask outside. Like, I mean, not that we were wearing masks outside anyway, but like,
why would we?
The CDC is actually saying all of the things that we have been saying for a fucking year. And so apparently, you know, it's obviously not that it ever was, but it's not about trusting the science, because if it was, they would be listening to what the CDC says.
Right. No, I mean, that's the thing. It's like for the past year plus, they were always saying, oh, we're CDC compliant. We're trusting the science. And now the CDC. So, I mean, if that's your logic, now that the CDC has come out and said, you don't have to do any of this stuff, you should be listening to them. But look, if you're if you're a person in your 20s and 30s, you're healthy, you've been vaccinated, and you're outside and you're wearing a mask, like, there is nothing sensible about what you're doing. And I don't like using the term sheep, because I feel like it's overused and it's unimaginative. But if you are one of these young, healthy people who has been vaccinated and is wearing a mask outdoors, you are a fucking sheep. There's no other way to describe it. There is nothing about what you're doing that makes sense. The only reason you're doing it is because you have been completely propagandized by these inveterate liars on the television into getting you to do absolute nonsense. Nothing about what you're doing makes sense. And these people still walk around with like this air of, self-anointed higher virtue than people like you and me, because they're engaging in these virtue signaling theatrics in which there is absolutely no evidence to support its efficacy whatsoever.
And a lot of them have even said as much. Like the mask, at this point, the mask isn't even not that it ever was, but for most of them at this point, the mask isn't even about health, safety, anything like that. It's trying to prove that they aren't a Republican. Like that's their big kicker for that is they want to wear the mask so that nobody will mistake them for a Republican. How does that even make any fucking sense? Like, I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. If you're wearing a mask, you're probably a dumbass. That, you know, I kind of delineate between actual intelligence and dumbass. I don't care about Republican or Democrat.
No, I mean, you know, these people will just constantly insist that they're not only smarter than you, but they're you know, more virtuous than you. And it's like, okay, you're literally, no one likes wearing the mask. Like, it's incredibly uncomfortable, and we've talked about this numerous times. It restricts your breathing. Like, it just having, you know, all healthcare professionals will tell you, like, you never walk around with the same mask, take it on and off all day and then put it back on your face. They wear it not to protect against viruses. They wear it so, like, you know, particles, when they're performing surgery, aren't, like, you know, constantly transmitting between one another. And as soon as they're done with doing whatever they've done, they take it off and they throw it out. So, like, if you're walking around restricting your breath, wearing this filthy mask, you know, strapping it directly over your nose and mouth, and the irony is that you're doing it to prove that you're smarter than those backwards Republicans who don't follow the science. Hang on, give me 1 second. My wife is calling me. Apologies. Hey, sorry about that. I told my wife I was filming a podcast. She totally forgot.
Tell her I'm busy. Leave me alone, woman. It never fails. I'll tell the kids, like, I'm going to be interviewing somebody for the next hour. I need you to be quiet. 45 seconds after I start the interview, it sounds like they're trying to drill through the floor to get into the room from the basement, like downstairs. I'm like, so then I have to stop the interview, put it on pause, go downstairs, beat children. Like, it's just, it never works out well.
Yeah, well, that's the reason I'm in the car, is because I got a 2.5-year-old son, and if I were doing it anywhere in the home, he'd be like looking for me, and, you know, just, you know, it'd be a huge distraction. You know, it's adorable, but it'd be like, I can't be dealing with that while I'm trying to shoot a podcast. So
you've seen, we can cut all this out or we can leave it in. It's up to you.
I'll leave it in. It's fine.
Have you seen the Ben Armani interviews? He's had a couple of them. I know it was one with Buck, and I think it was with Pete Quinones, where his kid, like, wanders into the room and just starts talking to him, like, towards the end of the interview.
I think so. Yeah.
It's really cute. It's cute and hilarious. It's like,
yeah,
like, just randomly a small child walks into the room.
Right. It's one of those things, like, when you're filming it, you think, oh my God, this is so embarrassing, but the audience thinks it's, like, so cute. Like, do you remember that video a few years ago where, like, the guy who was on British television, and, like, both of his young children barged in, and he was having a really important conversation, and his wife, like, runs in chasing after them, and, like, she's desperate to get them out, and she slams the door, and the guy's, like, so embarrassed. He thinks the interview's just been catastrophic, but, like, everyone who was watching it just loved it.
Like, up to the point that she ran out with them and like slammed the door behind her, he maintained his composure pretty well. Like, he kept powering through, even though there was very clearly a whole bunch of shenanigans with children going on behind him. Like, he held himself together pretty well for the most part. It was
like first his like 3-year-old daughter walks in, and you're like, oh, this is getting great. And then, like, his little baby, he's like in his little walker, he comes strolling in after her. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, watch the video. It's awesome. You can find it on YouTube. It'll come right up.
All right, so where were we? Masks and morons, and
so yeah, just you know, just this complete nonsense about these people who are still just walking around, you know, in this you know, coronavirus theater. And, you know, what Rand Paul said to Dr. Fauci, you know, a couple months back, and let's get into that. I mean, just Dr. Fauci, and what an absolute fraud that guy is. And just, you know, basically everything Rand Paul accused him of, he proved to be completely correct. And Fauci basically in interviews a few weeks later admitted that everything look, I didn't want to send mixed signals. That's why I was walking around. Motherfucker, all you've done throughout this entire pandemic is send mixed signals, and you've gotten absolutely everything wrong. How anybody could still trust Dr. Fauci at this point is beyond me. And, you know, it's like you and me, we're not these like we're reasonably intelligent, I would say. We're not like these geniuses who have this superhuman ability to observe bullshit. It's like I'm not spending hours digging through the internet or watching Alex Jones to figure out what's really going on here. Do you want to know why I know all these people are completely full of shit and they're liars? Because I watch them. That's all I do is I watch them and I listen to what they have to say. I remember it, and then I watch them a few days later say something completely different. I watch them as all of their predictions turn out to be completely bullshit. They all predicted basically hell on earth for Texas when they opened up back in early March. Biden called it Neanderthal thinking. Fauci said they're playing with fire. I think the CDC director said it would be hell on earth. Since that time, they've had the largest indoor boxing event in the history of boxing. The Texas Rangers have had full baseball stadiums every single home game. No one's wearing masks. They've been completely open. And since that time, their numbers are the best in the country, the best in the country. And their vaccination rates are 40% lower than the national average. So it's not down to the vaccines. And we also know that people are still getting infected, even if they get the vaccine. Okay. So somebody owes me an explanation for Texas, and I'm not getting it from anyone. And Dr. Fauci, this fucking fraud, who I think of the worst thing you could want to do to someone. That's what I want to do to Dr. Fauci. Did you see that interview or where he was being pressed by Jim Jordan? And Jim Jordan was basically telling him, explain Texas. You predicted doom and gloom for Texas. They're doing better than anyone else. All these places that have been open, which are red areas, which have lower vaccination rates, which don't follow the rules, they're all doing better than all of these follow the science blue states. Explain that to me. And Dr. Fauci, first he said, well, it's because the people in the open states are actually following the rules and the people in the closed states aren't following the rules. Okay, so that was his explanation, that people in red states are actually more slavish to the science than people in blue states are, which we all know is complete bullshit. And then Jordan basically called him out on that, told him it was BS. And then Dr. Fauci pretended like he couldn't hear him. And then when Jordan was just like, just look at the charts. You don't have to hear me. Fauci pretended like he couldn't see the charts. This man is such an obvious fraud, and I'm so sick of people who still can't see it.
And that's the thing about Fauci. Like I've said this before, he is a doctor effectively in degree only. Like he has a doctorate in medicine, but he is not a doctor. He has never at any point in his entire professional career actually been a doctor. He has never been a physician. He has never done surgery, nothing. He got a degree. He got his doctorate in medicine or whatever his actual doctorate is in. And he then went into bureaucracy. He has been a career bureaucrat. It's like the dumbass people that suggested that they should make Dr. Jill Biden the attorney general because she has even though she has a doctorate in education. Like she's also not an actual doctor. Fauci has never been an actual doctor. He has a doctorate and it's in medicine, but he has never been a practicing physician in any way. Give me just a second. I gotta throw my dog out.
Sure.
Yeah, like he's never been an actual doctor, and
no
people hang their hat on. Well, he's the expert. He's the only thing he's an expert in is coming up with bad policy. I mean, look at his work on AIDS. Like you could go through the history of everything that he's done as a bureaucrat, and it is all just fucking abysmal. Like he's terrible. Wrong.
He sucks at everything.
Everything. Like, and which emphasizes, the corruption and just the horribleness of politics and bureaucracy. Like, if I was that bad at my job, I wouldn't have a job. Like,
no.
Like not at all. Like not in the industry. Like I would have been run out of the industry because obviously I fucking suck and don't know what I'm doing. Like I'd have had to go find something else to do. But in politics, it's like failure is almost encouraged. Like he can be completely
because you
wrong.
Get more money. If
right.
You fail, you get to ask for more public money. When there's no market industry in the world where the worse you are at your job, the more funds you get. Only in government does that happen.
Yeah, other than government, that's not the way it ever works.
Yeah. No, well, like you said, Dr. Fauci, he's not a practicing doctor. He's a bureaucrat with a fancy degree, which are quite frankly just the worst people on the face of the earth. They're the most dangerous, destructive people on the face of the earth. And like you said, like, how is it possible that the ultimate authorities on the biggest event of our lives could be this bad at their jobs, get absolutely everything wrong? Even if people don't have the perspective that you and I do, which these people are corrupt liars and that there's something a little bit more nefarious going on. The only other conclusion is they're utterly incompetent. They're utterly incompetent and they shouldn't have their jobs. How can you be this wrong about everything? Okay. Mike Osterholm, who is currently working for the Biden administration, said March of 2020 that COVID-19 has a 3 to 4% mortality rate. Okay. He was off by a factor of what, 100? You can't be that wrong. They predicted 2 million dead in America by the end of 2020. They said Sweden, for not locking down, would have 100,000 dead by the summer. Okay, they said that asymptomatic spread was pervasive, which we now know is bullshit. They said that the World Health Organization early on said that human-to-human transmission didn't exist. And we know that they were lying on behalf of the Chinese government, because China, and we can get into that later, China had all sorts of bullshit going on with their numbers and what they were trying to peddle. They said that they said that we had to lock down. We know that that was nonsense. They told us to stay home, save lives. And now we know that the virus spreads almost entirely indoors, and that exercise and sunshine are two of the best things you can get. So how do you get something that wrong? You have this hashtag that just, pervaded the entire society, telling everyone to stay home, be a hero, stay home, don't kill your grandma, don't go outside. And it turns out that was the worst possible advice that they could have given us. Every single person involved in peddling that narrative should be instantly fired and completely hated. And instead, they're still on TV giving us their terrible advice. And like you said with the AIDS, go back to how Dr. Fauci disgraced himself during the 1980s AIDS crisis. He was saying that people could catch it on surfaces, much like what they told us with coronavirus. They said people were wiping down their groceries, they were wiping down their surfaces every time they left someone. Now we know that was complete nonsense. Okay, and now it's coming out about this lab leak theory, which Dr. Fauci and the mainstream media spent all of last year calling people conspiracy theorists, very angrily and acrimoniously calling people conspiracy theorists for talking about this. People who were talking about it like experts were censored in big tech. And now Dr. Fauci and all these media institutions, they're all just casually talking about it as if they didn't do what they were doing last summer. And it's just stunning to watch. These people have no credibility whatsoever, and yet so much of the population still just worships them and everything they have to say. It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, the way that the public education system has been developed, it creates this situation where people are too fucking stupid and sheepish to look at stuff for themselves and realize that Fauci is a bureaucrat, that the people at the CDC they're not doctors, they're bureaucrats as well. Like the Center for Disease Control.
You have one fucking job. You're the CDC. You have one job: control diseases, and you failed abysmally at it. Okay, even going back to last year, they were keeping private companies from developing tests for the coronavirus. So they fucked that up. They got everything wrong. Their one job they catastrophically failed at. The entire CDC should be completely disbanded.
It's the problem with government as a whole, is that the people who are in these positions don't know shit about what they're doing. It's all bureaucrats at the CDC. They're not doctors, they're not physicians. And then when the actual doctors come out and talk about this stuff, they get censored, they get banned, they get just like run out of. I don't know if you've listened to it. Pete, when Free Man Beyond the Wall, has had some really good episodes covering this stuff. He talked to Dr. Bigtree, who was a producer of The Doctors on, I think it was on CBS for a long time. But he goes into all of the stuff about the vaccines and how these specific vaccines for COVID and their origins and everything, and just like the really shady, questionable shit that's involved in that. But also in vaccines, generally speaking, and the way that the U.S. kind of handles that, and the FDA and the CDC handle vaccines and all of that stuff. And then he's got another one that just came out this week where they're looking at specifically at the coronavirus vaccines and different stuff about that. And people the actual doctors, when they talk about this stuff, they get removed. Like there's a doctor that they were talking about in the one this week out in Oregon that he goes for informed consent in vaccinating children, and parents seek him out because he doesn't follow the CDC schedule. He allows parents to look at the information and make a decision on whether or not they think their kids need to get these different vaccines, because a lot of vaccines that kids get are completely meaningless, like hepatitis B and some of these others. Like the odds of the kid getting that are slim to none, like at any point in their life are slim to none. And they're grouping all these vaccines together. And if a doctor does that, if a doctor goes for informed consent, tells the parents what it is, gives them their options, and allows them to have the opportunity to decide what they want to do, then that guy lost his license because he wouldn't follow the CDC schedule. So, and it's all just, none of it is actually about the science. And like I was saying, like that's the way it is across all divisions of government. Like the people in the Department of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, what the fuck does he know about anything Department of Transportation? Why is he the head of that? Most of the time, people who are in the Department of Agriculture don't know shit about agriculture. They didn't grow up on a farm. They haven't been in business. Exactly. Like it's never actual trust the experts. None of these people are fucking experts. They're bureaucrats assigned to a position because they knew the right person or they jerked the right person off. Like they don't. They're not experts. They're the person that was given the job for some reason or another. The experts are the ones who are actually in the field being silenced because they won't go with the narrative.
Right. Well, even if these people are experts, you could have like the greatest genius who's ever existed. Like the idea that one person is going to dictate from like Washington, D.C., how 350 million incredibly diverse people with like varying skills and, expertise in certain fields over, 3,000 miles east to west, 2,000 miles north to south, incredibly diverse terrain and mountains and fields and different climates, and just the incredibly unique and corrupt nature of individuals, that one person can just dictate how all of this stuff is going to operate throughout an entire country. It's patently insane. It's just not possible. And this is what, all of the great free market thinkers understood. This is why central planning always fails, because you cannot, I don't care how educated you are, you do not have the expertise to understand how all of these things work on a person-to-person basis. And look, speaking of vaccines, so much of this pandemic and the stuff that's gone on has filled me with just, an unbelievable amount of just uncontrollable rage. But the fact that they are talking about vaccinating children under the age of 18, between 2 of 18, I don't know if I've ever heard anything that's pissed me off more in my life. And, for the people who call us anti-vaxxers, it's just amazing because they don't have any arguments. It's, look, you have a vaccine. I'm going to try to break this down as logically as I can to try and convince people why folks like you and me are against this vaccine. You have a vaccine that came to market 10 times faster than it normally takes to develop vaccines. The average vaccine takes 7 years. This thing came to market in 9 months. It hasn't gone through proper clinical trials. It hasn't been officially approved by any medical institution. It uses completely experimental technology. It is over a virus whose average victim of death is 2 years older than the average American life expectancy and has an average of 2.5 comorbidities. It is a virus in which children under the age of 18, if they're healthy, have zero chance of dying from. It is over a virus that has been highly politicized. It is over a virus in which the experts have gotten absolutely everything wrong, over a virus in which there has been mass censorship, and it's over a virus in which any good news that comes out, it is completely suppressed by the mainstream media and the health establishment. If you look at what's happening in Texas, based on what we said earlier, the only explanation is there is a significant amount of natural immunity. Okay, and I'm pretty convinced I had the virus in like early December because I tested positive and I had some mild cold-like symptoms. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it was COVID, but it could have been. Now, if I had COVID and recovered, that means I have antibodies. And a lot of doctors will tell you, and again, you won't hear them on the mainstream media, a lot of doctors will tell you any natural immunity you may have is much more effective than a vaccine you can get. And there is no discussion. Okay, even if you're one of these doctors who thinks that vaccines are better than natural immunity, okay, that's fine. But can we at least have the discussion? Can we at least hear experts debate these things? But they're not even allowing the debate. There has been so much bullshit and so much incompetence and so many lies and hypocrisies and suppression about this virus. I am not injecting myself with what is literally an unproven experimental vaccine over a virus that, as a healthy man in his 30s, I have virtually no chance of dying from. It does not make any sense. And I do not trust these people because they've done nothing but lie and get absolutely everything wrong about this virus since last March. And the people who have gotten things right have been censored and ignored. And the biggest example being this lab leak theory, which the New York Times and Dr. Fauci and the CDC and the Washington Post and CNN all insisted that you were a dangerous conspiracy theorist for talking about it. Tucker Carlson was the only mainstream media personality who spoke about this theory, and the rest of the media universally conspired to pillory him for bringing it up. And now they're all casually discussing it as if they didn't spend all of last year doing what they were doing. I don't fucking trust these people. I am not injecting this vaccine into my body, and I sure as hell am not injecting my son with this vaccine. And the argument is, oh, well, it's not about you. It's about keeping other people safe. I don't fucking care. I am not injecting my 2-year-old son so some 35-year-old white woman, progressive twat, who's irrationally terrified and completely uninformed can feel safer. I don't know her, and I don't fucking care about her compared to the safety and the health of my son.
Exactly. And so a comparison that I have made before with the vaccine stuff is this is a flu-like virus. And the flu vaccine has been around forever. The flu vaccine has never been particularly effective as far as I'm aware. Also, the flu vaccine has typically less than a 50% vaccination rate annually. I think it's 42 to 48%, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Because they're guessing.
Right, because it's a guess. And right. That's what this one is too. Only with even less actual research done on it. So, right. So the flu vaccine is ineffective anyway. Less than half of the population gets vaccinated, and the flu is something that has been actually kills young, healthy people at times. Infants and small children are susceptible to it. Yeah. So that seems like it would be a good comparison in that. Why do we need to be pushing this vaccine when the vaccine that has been out for forever, most people don't even get it? And like for me, I have never in my life gotten a flu vaccine or had the flu. I've had some pretty gnarly colds, but I've never actually had the flu. My mother, on the other hand, was a school teacher for forever. And she was required by the school to get the flu vaccine every year. Every year she got the flu. It seems, you can't take a 1-on-1 comparison and extrapolate that out, but it just seems really convenient that she got a flu vaccine every year, and every year she was sick. And on that point, since she retired and has stopped getting the flu vaccine, she doesn't get sick.
Yeah.
Just, it's too fucking coincidental for that not to have some, connection or relevance. It's just, I don't know how people could look at that and not see the correlations there. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, causation doesn't necessarily prove correlation, but that's a pretty damning antidote to say that, to just completely ignore, and yeah, like you were saying, like the data is very explicitly clear about the fact that the flu for children under 18 is far more deadly than coronavirus. Like, it's not super deadly, but children do actually die from the flu. Healthy children, they're not dying from the coronavirus. And there was actually a recent report that found out, even with the minuscule numbers, they just found out that they were actually overestimating how many children had actually wound up in the hospital. So the number was almost non-existent beforehand. And now we found out that the actual number is even lower than we previously thought it was. So look, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier. these people who just listen to the mainstream media and listen to Dr. Fauci, they are the most misinformed people in the country when it comes to coronavirus. Everything that they're walking around with, believing in their head, is complete bullshit. There is no need for you to vaccinate your 4-year-old child. And I would actually question like your ethics as a parent if you're considering doing it. I'm seeing stories of people who are like using their kids as the clinical trial for these vaccines. It's like, what the hell is wrong with you? It is stunning, like the people like you and me who are just have been the victims of not victims. We've been the target of so much hatred, because of our views on the coronavirus. Not nearly enough hatred is directed towards people like that who are literally using their children as science experiments because they are so misinformed and irrationally terrified. It is so creepy.
And irrationally is probably like the key word. I'm going to pitch it a little bit, which is weird, but there's a new series on Amazon Prime called Solos. And if you get a chance, watch episode 4. It looks at, so the episodes look at an individual, and they're really interestingly done because it's basically just a camera on a person in a setting, and like you're going through their story in one way or another. Well, in episode 4, it's a person who has been isolated in her home for 20 years, and it's directly talking about a virus, and you can assume whether, I don't think they ever actually refer to it as coronavirus in the episode, but it's a pretty clear parallel to what they're looking at. And it's a person who has irrationally locked herself in her home for 20 years, and the way it kind of builds the episode out is like she's not the only one. There are others, and it really focuses in on the irrationality of it, which was kind of refreshing and interesting, especially coming from Amazon. But the episode was like, as I was sitting there watching it, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is probably going to be a reality in 20 years from now.
Oh man, yeah. Have you ever read I know you've read George Orwell. Have you read Aldous Huxley?
Got it right there.
Yeah. I mean, he seems to have been, and I like George Orwell, and he seems to have gotten a lot of right. Huxley seems to have been a bit more accurate as in terms to what was going to go on, because it's like his argument was that people would be so brainwashed and propagandized that they would basically welcome the boot grinding down on their neck and they would beg for more. And it goes back, like, I remember last summer I was telling people that mandatory vaccinations were coming. I was like, it's not going to be mandatory in the sense that some government agent's going to burst down your door and inject you with something, but it's going to be mandatory in the sense that if you want a life, you're going to have to show proof of vaccination. And of course, people laughed at me and they mocked me and they called me a conspiracy theorist. Fast forward a few months when all these talks about vaccination passports were coming and certain places are actually implementing them, the same people who call me a conspiracy theorist are literally applauding the idea of vaccine passports. So yeah, that boot on your neck, you're going to love it, man. And have you heard like the stories about there was a woman, she was tweeting about, I think it was in Canada, how they were saying that if your kids test positive, you should quarantine them. And she was locking her small children in their bedroom, and they're banging on the door saying, "Mommy, I miss you. Mommy, I'm lonely. Mommy, I'm sad." And she's like, it's so heartbreaking to have to listen to my little 7-year-old. And it's like, what the fuck? Again, talking about misplaced hatred towards people like you and me. We need to hate people like that. We need to publicly shame incredibly irresponsible and deranged parents like that. That is fucking sick to do that to your child.
Don't miss your 7-year-old. Open the goddamn door and be a parent. That's the responsible, reasonable thing to do. As a parent, if my kids are sick, I am going to take care of my kids.
Yes,
knowing that there's a good chance I'm probably going to get whatever they've got, but they need me to care for them. And that's what I took on as a parent. I wasn't particularly excited to have kids. I'm not really a parental type. I'm a little bit too abrasive. But when I had kids, it changed. And it is what it is. And at that point, you are responsible for taking care of them. And if that means, to the detriment of your own health, then that's what you do. You don't lock them in a fucking room and isolate them and listen to them beat on the door and beg for you. You open the door and you go be a fucking parent. And if the CDC says otherwise, tell the CDC go fuck themselves. Because Like,
yeah,
I've,
you know,
the stories of normalizing child abuse and encouraging child abuse. Every government agency that has said anything along those lines, that we should mask children, that we should quarantine children away from their parents and their family, that we should be doing all these things to children, those buildings should be burned to the fucking ground, and those people should all be run out to sea and dumped on an island somewhere and left to fucking rot, because they are the scum of the earth. To treat children the way we have treated them in this pandemic is absolute evil. It is evil.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can't really add anything to that. You pretty much, you said it perfectly.
I got a little more fired up about that than I expected I would. But
no, it's a proper thing to be fired up about. I mean, this has been one mass experiment in government-sanctioned child abuse. That's of all the shit that we've been subjected to, what we've done to children based on absolutely zero science whatsoever to appease the fucking teacher unions. We have abused children in an unprecedented societal way that you would never expect to see from a first world country. And again, like, people who will say that I'm a conspiracy theorist because I talk about how people have just been completely propagandized by lies they see on the television. Okay, well, the examples we just gave, people locking children in their rooms for 2 weeks because the TV told them to. What would you call that other than someone being brainwashed by absolute nonsense? It's just stunning to watch.
And talking about the teachers unions, like so I kind of feel I briefly went into studying education and had considered being a teacher. I ended up deciding against it because it just, because the way the education system is run, it wasn't something that I like. I took 3 education classes, and seeing the way that the system is run, I realized pretty quickly this is not something I want anything to do with. It's not something that is actually good for the kids. But if you go into that field, you kind of take that parental mindset that I was talking about, that you are here for the kids, and it is your job to, you take on the risk. You understand that I might get sick, I might get spit up on, I might get, my shoes glued to the floor. You're
dealing with kids, you're dealing with children,
right? You take that stuff on because that is what your calling was. I mean, I know for my mom, that was what she wanted to do. She took that on knowing full well exactly what she was getting into. And the fact that we're bending over backwards to these fucking teachers unions, which are also just a bunch of bureaucrats, that to protect them, to keep them out of school while still paying them, while at the detriment of the kids, they're refusing to do testing in a lot of schools in a lot of states that have been locked down for this entire time and haven't let kids go back to school, because they know that it's going to show that these kids are falling behind. And not only are they falling behind, they're falling behind in a system that was already putting them behind to begin with.
Yeah.
The testing is just going to show that we have completely set a whole generation back a year and a half for something that doesn't affect them anyway, to protect these bullshit teachers unions and to let them get paid to not fucking work. That is infuriating.
We're not gonna know the full ramifications and consequences of this until 10 years from now, when these kids really start to grow up. We're not gonna really have any idea exactly what this has done to a generation of kids for a decade or so, and special needs children as well. My nephew, he's on the spectrum, and he struggles with some things, and he got into a program that he was making a lot of progress in. And my sister was thrilled to see the progress he was making. And this situation has just basically obliterated any of that progress that he was making. And, he's back to square one, and it's heartbreaking to see. And, I don't know, who Corey DeAngelis is, right?
I think I've heard the name.
Yeah. You probably know. I think he was on Malice's podcast.
Okay.
In fact, I know he was. So anyway, to prove that this is all about the teachers unions, he was showing the teachers unions vote, they 95% of their donations go to Democrats, right? And if you look at where schools are open versus where schools are closed, it is a direct 100% correlation between blue states, red districts and blue districts. The redder the places, the schools have been open. The bluer the district, the schools have had, all these more hoops to jump through, and in many cases just been completely closed. So it absolutely 100% is about politics. And these teachers unions, they can go on that fucking island with all those bureaucrats you were talking about as well. And I don't mean to, I know there's some good teachers out there. I have a friend who's a public school teacher. I have conversations with him all the time about the uphill battle that he has to endure. He's like, if you watch Game of Thrones, that scene where Jon Snow is by himself with the sword and the entire army is like coming towards him. That's what the good teachers in the public school system are like. It's just they're fighting a battle by themselves. So, God bless those people. But in general, these public school teachers, they are vermin, or at least the ones associated with the unions are.
Yeah, and that I've caught quite a bit of shit for some of my negative takes on public schools and teachers and stuff like that. Because, like I said, my mom was a teacher. I have a lot of very good friends who are teachers, and they are excellent teachers. They do everything they can to be good teachers. And when I talk about this stuff, I'm not talking about specifically those teachers. Usually what I'm talking about is all of the administrative, bureaucratic, union bullshit that goes into what public education is, because that's the big problem we have with the public education system is there are more administrators and bureaucrats in the public education system than there are actual teachers. How does that make any sense? Especially when the biggest complaint is that there aren't enough teachers for these students and that teachers don't make enough. Well, why there aren't enough teachers? Because there are way too many bureaucrats and way too many administrators. You know why the teachers don't make enough? Because the bureaucrats, the administrators make all the money. And so the entire education budget goes to pay those motherfuckers and doesn't actually go to pay the teachers and the people who are doing the jobs. And that's why government needs to be removed from that, because and the people you're talking about, ironically, these are often like usually the diversity deans and the equity administrators. So they constantly go on about inequality and oppression. Meanwhile, these are grown-ups who are making six-figure salaries, doing absolutely nothing, fucking over kids in the process while they're lecturing all of us about a lack of equity in the world. It's just the level of hypocrisy is just it's like it makes me want to get violent. It really does. These people are the scum of the earth. Yeah, we've the theme of this whole thing really could tie back to everywhere there is bureaucracy involved in something, there is corruption and there's malfeasance. Like the CDC, the FDA, the teachers union, all of it. Like, which not that surprises somebody like me or somebody like you, but like the average blue-pilled dumbass that just has a public education and watches CNN or Fox, they just think that's normal. They don't realize that the entire thing that is fucking everything up and setting us on this path, like, it is the government over-involvement. All you got to do is look at where the money goes in all of these departments, in all of these agencies, in all of these different branches of, government overreach. Money always goes to administrators and bureaucrats and people who don't know what they're doing and don't have any reason that they should be in those positions. If we actually had real educators, like not people with a doctorate in education like Jill Biden, like people who actually have been in the field and have worked with children in those positions, then shit might get done. If we actually had people who have worked in a field and have done agricultural stuff in those and have, traded on the Chicago Board of Trade and understand how markets and growing seasons and the different parts of the country and everything work, we might actually have good policy on that. Like what it comes down to is the wrong people are in positions of power all the time. I'm in management. I have, and for ever since I got out of college, I have been. it has always been my approach that I need to know what my employees do so that I can be a good manager. And the government doesn't take that approach. Like, you don't, to be in a position of power within the government, it's probably better if you don't know anything, because then
there's no incentive for you to know anything.
Yeah, because then you're more susceptible to be manipulated and to push whatever direction the people who are really pulling the strings on shit want you to go. If you actually had a half a lick of fucking sense about the topic that you're supposed to be the expert on, then you would probably tell them get fucked every time they try to push some of this narrative bullshit. So they don't want people who actually are experts, who actually know what they're doing. They want the dumbest motherfucker available to be in that position, because dumb motherfuckers are easy to manipulate.
Yeah, no, there's nothing more dangerous than extreme power and no consequences if you wield that power incorrectly. You know, even if you have like the most competent, well-intentioned person in the world, giving him unlimited power over the lives of so many people is still a bad idea. But we're not even giving it to the best people in the world. We're giving it to some of the most corrupt, slimy, dishonest motherfuckers on the face of the earth. We are giving them immense power to wield over countless people with no consequences if they screw up. And we have seen that over and over again with this pandemic. And so let's hit on this, and then I guess we could wrap up, because I probably got to get going. And again, I'll try to sort of like reach out to the normies from a more logical perspective about how you can view some of the bullshit that's gone on through this pandemic, because you and I, you know, we have a bit of an extreme take on it. It's the correct take. We're 100% right about everything, but it is kind of the extreme take. And, you know, I've actually gotten to the point where, like, if you're just at the point where you're asking questions. So like, you know, my wife, for example, she, you know, I think in the beginning she thought I was a little crazy, but, you know, being the loving wife she is, she entertained my deranged rants. But over the past several months, starting in the fall, she started to come around and be like, yeah, a lot of this stuff really is nonsense. This doesn't make sense. So if you're one of those people, even if you're not where you and I are, but you're at the point where you're starting to ask questions and you're saying, you know, this doesn't really make sense, like, I can work with you. That's good enough for me. Just get to the point where you're asking questions. So the most logical explanation is the medical industrial complex is absolutely a thing. There are people who exist and institutions who exist to make money off of medical issues and sick people. And they have their hands all over this pandemic. Okay. You know, my mother, for example, you know, she was suffering from like really bad heartburn for a while. And she went to a couple different doctors, and they like immediately tried to give her a drug, and she didn't want to take pharmaceuticals. So she kept looking for a new doctor. She finally went to a third one or a fourth one. And he said, and I don't know if I'm going to get the cocktail exactly right, but he basically said something along the lines of like, drink water with lemon and baking soda before you go to bed every night. And I don't know if the ingredients are exactly right, but similar to that. And she was doing that for a few days. And she said, like, you know, in a week, her symptoms were completely gone. She went back to the doctor and she was like, this is amazing. Like, how come no other doctors were telling me to do this? And he basically just told her, don't even get me started on all that stuff. He's like, you don't even want to know the half of it. And so, you know, you look at, like, everyone has an experience with going to the doctor for like a certain ailment. And the first thing they do, without even really checking you out, is they offer you a drug. Okay. The pharmaceutical companies, which are some of the most unethical institutions in the world, maybe with the exception of the weapons manufacturers, the worst corporations on the planet. It's pretty neck and neck. You know, they make billions of dollars off, you know, drugging people and drugging children and ruining their life. The opioid epidemic, which is just murdered, you know, killed, quasi-murdered, you know, countless people in rural America. And, you know, these are the people who are producing our vaccines, and there's no liability. They're completely exempt from legal accountability if anything goes wrong with these vaccines. And these people do not exactly have a very good history of being honest and ethical with their products. You know, you mentioned on the last podcast, if you watch a commercial with these people, you know, these products, the end of the commercial is just a laundry list of potential side effects. And those are the products that have been properly tested. This vaccine hasn't even been properly tested. Okay. So listen, if you want to get vaccinated as an adult, go ahead. I won't judge you. I won't call you sheep. I won't do any of that. If you're someone with like a pre-existing condition that, you know, can be really detrimental if you catch COVID, I totally get it. If you have a kid who has, you know, like a pre-existing condition that's really considered a COVID comorbidity, I can even understand that. And I'm not going to judge you. But if you're a young, healthy person, or if you have young children, there is no reason. None of the logic sides with getting vaccinated. None of it. I'm sorry. It just doesn't. I'm not the crazy one. Okay. And if you want to call me a conspiracy theorist, you have a lot of questions to answer for. Can you explain to me why the World Health Organization, which is obviously maybe the most corrupt institution in the world, and all of these doctors have gotten everything wrong, were propped up by the government, by the institutions, and by the mainstream media, while all these other doctors who got everything right were censored? Can you answer that question for me? Can you answer why they spent months vilifying people for leaving their homes, arresting people for running their business, and then on a dime celebrated and encouraged violent mobs burning those businesses to the ground? Can you explain to me why Dr. Fauci, who clearly has ties to the Wuhan lab that this virus supposedly came from, can you explain to me why any conversation about this was being censored and angrily dismissed as a conspiracy theory all last year, and now they're all talking about it? Okay, you have so many questions to account for, to ask. And if you don't want to ask them, that's fine. But anyone with two brain cells to rub together should be asking them. So don't come after me and act like I'm the naive one or I'm the idiot, because I'm asking questions that anyone who doesn't have their head up their fucking ass should be asking.
We're going to close on this. I had a massive white pill moment a few weeks ago. A friend of mine who I consider, like, we're not politically friends. Like, we did have, at no point in our entire friendship have we ever talked about politics in any way. But I would, just based on her personality, I would assume she's pretty leftist. Just, that's kind of her. She's definitely not running around with the Second Amendment groups or anything like that. So, but with that being said, a few weeks ago, she sent me a message, and it simply said, "What are your thoughts on the vaccines?" It's like, okay, that you definitely don't listen to my videos, or, you definitely don't listen to my podcast or watch my videos, which, I didn't expect that she would anyway, because I'm probably not her cup of tea. But I laid it out, and I said, well, at first I was like, how so? Like, what do you mean? And she said that she was getting a lot of pressure from other, like, not from a job or anything like that, but or from a doctor, like getting pressure from friends that she needed to get vaccinated. Like, she's younger than I am. She's probably early 30s, like right at 30, 31, and had asked or had said she was getting pressured by friends to, and very active and everything else, and that they were pressuring her to get the vaccine. And so she wanted to know what my thoughts were on it, which was really cool that she would ask me, like, because she knows what my political leanings are. So she wanted to get an opinion outside of that, echo chamber of the narrative. And so I explained to her what all of my hesitancies are about it and what all of the issues I see with it are. And then I shared with her the Pete Quinones and Stacy for Liberty or Stacy for Truth doing the interview of Dale Bigtree and everything that he talks about. And like, I sent her all of that stuff, and she was like, okay, that really makes a lot of sense. Like, that really kind of backs up my concerns and my hesitancy with getting it. Like, if somebody who has, no ties to the kind of, things that we and, that you and I are neck deep into on a daily basis are looking at this and saying, I don't know if this is such a good idea. That's a huge white pill. Like,
right.
Maybe a minority, but
yeah,
at least there are people who are starting to look at this and say, I'm not real sure about this. Maybe I don't want to do this. Maybe there's a narrative here that I don't need to be participating in. So, I mean, I think this, the lockdowns and just the way the media has really handled all of this for the last year is certainly waking a lot of people up who you may not expect. And that's like, there are a bunch of us out here like us who are very vocal about it. There are also a lot of people who are, not as vocal as us, but they're starting to openly ask questions. And there are also a whole lot of people who are just completely quiet about it, but that are sitting there looking at it going, yeah, it's kind of fucked up.
Yeah.
And I think the impact of this in turning people on to what's really going on is going to be a lot more significant than what we may expect. I mean,
I hope so.
We can see all the sheep. They get it tattooed literally.
A lot of them here in New York.
Inside.
Yeah. No, that people are literally getting their vaccine tattooed. It's my God.
Yeah.
They're branding themselves quite literally.
But I really think those are the vocal minority. And I think
hope so.
There is going to be a vast majority who are starting to look at this and say, I don't know if this is such a good idea.
Right. Yeah. So like I said, I don't expect anyone to be exactly where you and I are, but if you're just at the point where you're starting to ask questions, that's good enough for me. And I can forgive you for at this time last year, not necessarily asking questions, but in late May, 2021, if you're still just buying everything the TV tells you to, there's no excuse for that. There's absolutely no excuse. And you may just be a completely lost cause as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah.
Hey, that's the reality of it. We need to find the ones who aren't.
Yeah.
Like, we got to stop arguing with the ones who are lost causes. And
yeah, they're a waste of time.
We just got to write that off as there is no hope there, and find the ones who are asking questions.
Right.
It's right because they're out there, and
yeah, they are,
and they just need a little bit of information, and that's what we can give them. Like,
or at least point to the right people, like point to the right sources, or doctors, or articles that have basically questioned this in a very efficient, erudite, and succinct way.
Very much so.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's wrap on that. Thank you for coming on. And I am actually in talks with the guy is like an expert on HIPAA and how that all works. So I'm in talks with him to possibly do an interview sometime in the next couple weeks.
Cool.
Because with the vaccines and and the vaccination cards and the passports and all that shit, I want to get a professional take on what HIPAA is and how it applies to all of this stuff. So here in the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping to have a pretty in-depth conversation with this guy about that stuff that'll kind of inform a lot of the stuff that we've kind of been talking about today as well.
Sounds good, man. Yeah, tag me in that whenever you release it.
Absolutely.
All right, man. It's good to talk to you.
Yep, good talking to you. Have a good one.
Be well. Take care.